these movies provide like a safe space for kids to play with these emotions that maybe sometimes are, darker or, whether it's bullying or loss or something like that. It's kind of like a safe environment, hopefully surrounded by family, and you can talk about these things.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. The Mail Tribune has several podcasts to check out. Just head over to mailtribune.com to take a look. Today's conversation is a little different than my typical interviews because me and my guest, Jennifer Borget, just had so much fun talking about Disney. Jennifer is a former journalist, mom of 3, and the creator behind Cherish 365. She writes, takes incredible photos, and is always looking for new ways to tell stories with videos. Her blog has won several awards, including for Best Photography and Mom Blog of the Year in 2018. You've seen her on CNN, The Today Show, The Huffington Post, Baby Center, and many more. This is Jennifer's second time on the podcast. She came on in the early days back in episode 19, where we talked about cherishing motherhood and life. But I wanted to have Jennifer back on for her love of Disney. We are celebrating the launch of Disney by talking all things Disney. This is a little lighthearted, but also we take Disney a little deeper. We talk about everything from the impact movie night traditions have had on Jennifer's family to talking about how Disney movies create a space to talk about difficult things for children. And Walt Disney's legacy, love that. We also talk about Disney's decision to cast a Black woman as Ariel. You guys will love the first reaction Jennifer's daughter had when she found out, and hear Jennifer's thoughts on why representation matters. There's a lot of good stuff in this interview, so let's get to it. You love all things Disney, and I love how much joy Disney brings to you and your life and your family. But I want to know, take me to the Disney origin story. When was it that Disney started impacting your life? So when did you become this ultra Disney fan?
I think it was as a kid when over the summers, I think a lot of us had this, like kids of the 90s, where we, didn't have much to do over the summer. Our parents were working and we were home in front of the TVs. And our entertainment was those Disney VHS tapes. And my mom was a big collector of them. So we would just pop in those movies and rewind them to the beginning and play them and rewind them again and play them. So, and she's always been a movie collector. She still is to this day, not VHS anymore. But
that's good.
She likes to collect certain kinds of movies. So Disney was it when I was growing up. And then I continued that, when I got older and got married. It was even before kids. Like I was like, I'm going to start my Disney collection. And so it was the movies for me.
I remember seeing those pictures of all of your DVDs before you even had kids. How do you think that having those movies and kind of having your movie night tradition has impacted your family dynamic?
So I think I hope, I feel like time will tell, but already my kids how they start to surprise you when you hear, things come out of their mouths and you're like, okay, I kind of like that's some of me. I taught you a little bit of that, but that is totally you, and the different things. So they hear these quotes from the movies that we laugh about, and then they throw them at me, and I'm just so proud because I'm like, yes, like you guys, it's working, So of course, it's building a bond. Like every Friday, like they know it's movie night. They're looking forward to it. They know whose turn it is. They're excited and ready to watch a movie. But it's, beyond that, it's nice how it seeps in through the rest of the week and other random times.
I like that you mentioned talking about the movies, and it was more lighthearted, but I want to get a little deeper in the, you guys are having serious conversations as you're watching some of these movies.
Yeah, sometimes we are. And it's interesting how maybe the first time you see a movie, it doesn't really come up. But then a few times later, those conversations come up, and questions come up, like with Toy Story 4, how At first when you're seeing the dolls and stuff and you're thinking, oh, she's kind of neat. Okay, help me out. I'm trying to think of her name now. We just
Darn
watched
it.
it.
What is her name?
What is her name?
She has a yellow dress. Gabby.
Yes.
Gabby.
And I know Gabby.
Yeah.
Thank you. And, at first we're watching that and it's like, oh, she's the bad guy. But then, as you watch it again and again and you're realizing like, oh, like it's not like she just wants to be mean. She has her own issues that she's dealing with. And how does that come out and express itself? And how does she become kind of a bully because of what's going on behind the scenes in her life? And sometimes we use that to describe things that goes on at school, with the kids and what people are dealing with and how someone maybe treated them that day. And we think, well, who knows what's going on at home and how they're feeling. And maybe they're pushing that on you when they don't really mean to.
Oh, that is amazing. I love that. I love that you can take the fiction story and bring it into real life. And I think Disney does that on purpose. I think that's very intentional.
Frozen 2 just had they just had a media day, and I was kind of stalking Twitter a little bit with some of the quotes. And I think Kristen Bell said something that really resonated about how these Disney and Pixar movies, well, I guess that's not Pixar, but these movies provide like a safe space for kids to play with these emotions that maybe sometimes are, darker or, whether it's bullying or loss or something like that. It's kind of like a safe environment, hopefully surrounded by family, and you can talk about these things and, maybe it brings up other things that are happening that you haven't talked to your parents about. And just to kind of like feel those emotions in a place that is safe. And I think it's like, wow, that's really true.
And I like that it almost gives parents the tool. It's very easy to go and reference something like Toy Story 4 that you watch together as a family as they're dealing with similar situations in school. Any other examples that come to mind as we talk about this?
Okay, this is a very light example, but so we were watching Up recently and the little boy, like all the names are slipping my mind now.
Oh, darn it. I know when you're on the spot, it's hard. What is his name?
I'm like, I want to call him Wilson, but it's not Wilson.
He's a Boy Scout.
Oh my goodness. Yes, the cute little boy.
Yeah, I can't recall.
Okay, so he's walking and he's with Mr. Fredrickson, and they're walking and he's, talking, and he goes, "Hey, look, sand." And Jada, my oldest daughter, goes, "Why did he say that? Like, why did that come up?" And I was like, well, kids are random. Like, do you ever notice how you guys sometimes will say something and we'll say whatever, and then, and so now she points it out every time. Her brother, Russell, that's his name, Russell. Yeah. Her brother will say something and then she'll be like, "Hey, look, sand," because it's like a random, like she's noticing like, oh yeah, maybe we are a little bit like that. So,
Oh, that's so cute. I love that. Yes. That is so cute. Okay. Yeah. So princesses, a lot of people have, negative opinions about princesses and don't really want to push princesses. We all know that I'm not one of those people because I had a daughter and she waves at her princesses every morning. And I'm proud about it. But tell me about the positive influence you feel that your daughters now get from these princess movies.
Yeah, I really think it's interesting because I know that we'll say, oh, Belle and the Stockholm Syndrome and Ariel gave up her fins for legs for a man. And, but honestly, as a kid, I never saw it that way. And so I try to kind of first, as we're watching the movies and experiencing these stories, kind of see what they take out of it. What do they like about the movie? Is it the songs? Is it the characters? Is it the story? What parts of the story? Is the villain exciting? What is it that they're taking away from it? And then, as it gets, as we watch it more and maybe questions come up or, you're talking about, because really my daughter, my oldest is the most into these Disney movies and she loves all the princesses, but she isn't in it for the love story. It's not like she's like, oh, I'm Prince Eric. And if she was, I think that's fine too. But, for her, that's not what inspires her about them. Like she loves their different stories and she really taps into their personalities and what, Ariel to her is someone who is like a treasure hunter,
Yeah.
and someone who collects things. And Belle loves to read, and she's really into books. And,
Yeah.
so that's what she's pulling away from them. And that's what I tend to focus on too. Those positive traits. And I think that as she gets older, like, yeah, well, those topics might come up too, and we'll discuss those, but that's not a reason for me to shy away from those movies.
Yeah. When I became an adult and I realized people didn't like The Little Mermaid because of the love story, I was like, wait, what love story? I mean, of course I knew they fell in love, but I loved her because she went after her dream of having legs and wasn't afraid of going to the unknown. And I never saw her as wanting to be a human to be in love, but wanting to be a human to experience the culture and the life and the, running along the, what's it called? Just kidding. Street. Okay. Let's talk about how princesses have changed, like the new Jasmine movie. The Jasmine movie.
Yeah, hey, that's basically how it felt.
The Aladdin movie.
It felt like that.
So tell me about that, how that makes you feel in those conversations you're having with your oldest daughter.
Yeah, so I mean, that movie, first of all, my kids, I don't know how I feel about it. I do know how I feel about it. I'm a slightly disappointed that they're loving these live action movies more.
Yeah.
But I love when the stories get to evolve. And I felt like Aladdin and Jasmine, Jada was singing that Speechless song on repeat, over and over and over. And she loved her in that movie. And I did too, honestly. I mean, I think it's a great way to get another version of these stories that we grew up loving. And I especially love it when they do a good job, which I felt like they knocked it out of the park with Aladdin. And I mean, that's just, yeah. I mean, she loves both versions of Jasmine. But I know she really loves her outfits in the live action one and her personality, and especially the songs.
I loved having the conversation with my boys about how there was a time where women were not heard, and where there is still areas in our world where women are not heard. I thought that was an important conversation to have with them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's actually, I'm like, you know what? I need to sit her down and have a conversation about the meaning of that song, because that's absolutely right. I mean, that's the whole point of the song. And yeah, I think she would be completely boggled to hear that.
Yeah. So tell me about, you always post #representation matters. And I 100% agree. Tell me about how that has impacted your life, your family's life, as Disney has worked to be more inclusive.
For me growing up, there weren't any princesses that looked like me, any Disney princesses. And it didn't stop me from wanting to be them and wanting to dress up like them for Halloween and, everything like that. But I think that as I've gotten older and had kids, it's just become evident how, wow, some of the role models in my life were women who look like me. The people that I really admired and watched and aspired to be like were women who look like me. And it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to be like them because they look like me, but I saw them and I saw parts of myself and I felt like I could do that too because they had achieved that. So I think that it is important. And, as Disney continues to tell more stories and brings in different cast and decides to tell these stories in different ways, like they did with Aladdin and like how they're about to do with Little Mermaid, and bringing in, a new Ariel who looks different. I just think it's awesome because we have these other stories that we can still return to and that we love. And, when you meet Ariel at Disney World, she's still going to have her red hair and be exactly how we remember her in her animated form. But I think that it gives an opportunity for more little girls to see themselves in these different spaces. And not only girls like my daughter and girls like me who are like, wow, she looks like me, but the rest of the world also to see that and to see that beauty comes in different forms and different colors and different, shades. Like, I think it's important for everyone to see that. And I'm just so excited for little girls to see a Black Ariel. I just think it's going to be really impactful for more than just the Black community, like way more, you know?
Tell me about the conversation with Jada when you guys saw the casting.
Yeah. Oh man. I think I pulled it up on I was like laying in bed and looking, and first I read the name, cause it sounds like Halle Berry. And I was like, wait, what? Like she's a little old, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay. Halle Bailey. Okay. She's someone else. And I wasn't looking into it later, I'm like, oh, she sang this song. Okay, I know who this is. But at first I was like, oh, like, look. And my husband was next to me and I'm like, look at Ariel, she's Black. And I was so excited. And I went and told Jada, and I don't think I, prefaced it like, look, she's Black. It was just like, look, this is Ariel. And she said, oh, she looks like me. And, her hair. And so, she automatically went there. And I thought that was just so great. And, because I think sometimes she, is noticing and pointing out things, and other times it seems like it goes over her head because maybe how someone looks or the color of their skin isn't at the forefront at that moment. But, at that time, that was like the first thing she noticed about this picture. And I thought that was really cool.
It gives me goosebumps because I just think it's so important to be able to see yourself in characters that you love and admire. When I was a little girl, I dressed up as the Little Mermaid for Halloween. I didn't look like her. I dressed up as Jasmine. I didn't look like her. But the the princess I was like every day when I was walking around with my books open, pretending to be Belle, I was her every day because I looked like her. And that meant a lot to me. That was important to me. So I can see that.
Aww.
I know. For people who are listening, and I can't imagine there are a lot of people listening who aren't there yet in understanding why this matters, but what would you say to them?
I would probably say a lot of things, but not like in a rude way. Like I would just say, try to maybe put yourself in a different set of shoes, and try to think from that perspective for a little bit, and to remember that this isn't taking away from the other Ariel. I mean, the best Disney movies that have been redone, in my opinion, have been the ones where they have like changed the story and pushed it and made it different. Like we already have that Ariel. We already have that story. We've had that for decades and we've loved it and we could continue to love her. And this is another way to tell that story. And it's going to mean so much for so many people to see, this Ariel in another light. And not just, girls like my daughter who are like, oh, she looks like me. But I think that, every other little girl in the world hasn't really had a chance to see a Black princess on the big screen. Okay, we had Tiana, but she was a frog for like 85% of the movie. You know what I mean? And like, I could go on about that, but we are going to get to see her on the big screen for the whole movie. And, and I'm just picturing all the girls wanting to dress up like her after, and, maybe seeing someone like me on the street and thinking, oh, she looks like Ariel. You know what I mean? Like, because, I don't know. I think that is really cool.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about this in the context of what recently happened in your daughter's classroom. I didn't expect to get this deep, but here we are, because I do think I do think it's so, so important to, if someone's not there yet, to truly step into someone else's shoes, especially, a little third grader. Third grader? Is Jada third
fourth grade?
Fourth. Holy cow. To step into a fourth grader's shoes and see how this is going to matter, that everyone, little kids of, every color, can see that a Black princess is beautiful. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, first of all, I feel like we think that our kids don't notice color. And I think that maybe they don't talk about it or bring it up, but they're noticing, and they begin to notice, likes and differences, things that are similar and things that are different. And the more that we talk about it, the better. So yeah, in this situation, a little girl had told my daughter something about like her skin, like not wanting to sit by her or touch her because her skin was darker than hers. And my daughter had come home like, what is this? She actually had asked what racist meant because she thought that the girl said like, oh, are you calling me a racist? And Jane was like, no, what does that mean? And it made me think like, okay, let's talk about this and what happened. And she thankfully, like, she right away was like, oh, I love the way my skin is. And I was like, okay, good. Like I'm doing a good job. I'm at least like, we've gotten that, down. But I think talking about our differences and realizing that beauty comes in all shades and sizes and forms, and we're all different, and discussing these things is just going to help, us to raise a more accepting and loving generation. But not feeling like we need to shy away from the topic, like thinking, oh, if we point out someone's differences, then that's bad, because that's not bad. It's fine to point it out. And my son, he's in first grade, and he's one of those that like we were talking about, hey, look, there's sand. Like he's very like aloof and in his own world a lot of the time. And I didn't know really like how much he was picking up about our differences, or like his dad looking different than me, or like he's never brought it up. Whereas my oldest daughter had brought that up from a younger age. But we've been reading a book together called Soleil that talks about a little girl who has really dark skin, the color of midnight, and it's darker than the rest of her family. And her sister's skin, who's a lot lighter, has more friends at school and has cute names like Sunshine, but her nicknames are Blackie and stuff like that. And so the first time we read the book, like he was listening to, like he picked up on people making fun of people, like, oh, and they're calling her ugly and that's not nice, and they're calling her pretty. And but then by like the third or fourth time we read it, he said, oh, Mom, your skin's like hers and my skin's like hers, and Daddy's like. So he was pointing that out, and it wasn't like this had never occurred to him before, but he had just never vocalized it before. So I think like providing a safe way to talk about these things, or like I think this Little Mermaid movie is a great example of an easy way to bring it up. Like Ariel, like when you're talking, we always do this with the live action movies after we see them. Like, well, what were the similarities? What were the differences? Like, and I'll geek out and make a Venn diagram, and we'll talk about, about the movies. They'll break it down like that. But I think this could be a good way. Like, how did this Ariel look different? And she, well, they're both beautiful. That's a similarity. And how are they different? Oh, one's skin's darker and one's hair's a little different, or, something like that. Like, I think it's a great way to talk about it and realize that it doesn't have to be this scary, daunting topic.
I love that. And I love when you read that book you were talking about, you read it to your first graders class, and everyone there was, oh my goodness, she is beautiful, right? Was that the response?
Yes, it was. And I was like, seriously getting chills, like, oh, these kids, and some were like, oh, I love the darker one. I like her more. She's pretty. I'm like, well, you don't have to like her more, but but it was just, it was really neat. And then like one of the moms had found me in the little group, text thing on the, the class, like they have the class messaging thing. And she said, what was the book you read today? My daughter came home and just kept talking about it, and I'm going to buy it for her for Christmas. So, and it's funny because I was so nervous about taking that book and reading it to the class and like, oh, is this like too heavy, or is it, whatever. But I'm like, what? It's a children's book. It's for kids. Like this is, if I'm not going to read this book, who is? And, this is a conversation that should be had. And it's not like it's something that's too serious.
And I think that impact you're talking about from the live action Little Mermaid will be similar to that. And I love that. I think that's wonderful. Okay. When you think about Disney movies, which one do you think has been the most impactful on your life?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I've always had this, like, what's your favorite movie? And that's easy for me to name.
Go ahead and say it. You can say it.
Okay. Well, my favorite easily is The Lion King. I mean, I just love the music, like the time of my life that I saw it. Like it was probably the first movie I cried in. And, like it was just like, oh, we went to see it over and over and over. Like I love that movie, and I continue to love it. I do not like the live action, but I loved the animated movie.
Because there were no changes, which we've been talking about. It was like carbon
there were
copy.
No changes, and the animals did not have emotion. They were too realistic.
Yeah.
Like it was just like watching, some kind of documentary where they're like putting their voices behind it. It was odd. But
It's okay. I loved it, but it's
you
fine.
loved it?
I did.
Okay, well, that's okay. But
In fact, wait, I got to tell you. So in the
yes,
bracket, you put together this Disney bracket, and I'll share it in show notes because it is amazing. My son, The Lion King, actually lost points as he was trying to determine whether it should move forward when he found out it was the animated version because he loves the live action so much. Yeah,
my kids do too.
It might be because Timon and Pumbaa, they go ahead and say fart. I think they go ahead and say it, and I think that just sold it for them.
That's so funny. Maybe that was it. Well, I know my kids liked it. My son specifically because they look real, and he loves like watching animal documentaries, and he just was like, "Yeah, this is so cool." But
that's great.
It's no question to me. like Simba has tears. Like we watched it again after. I'm like, it's no comparison. I don't know. But yeah, so that's definitely my favorite. But impactful, gosh, that might be different. Man, what do you have one? I'm like, what's yours?
Oh man, okay. I think. I mean, I love so many of them, but I really think it's Moana. And I think it's Moana because it came out at a time in my life where my life was changing and evolving from, news anchor to podcaster. And it's almost embarrassing to say because I do realize that this movie was made for children and I was a full-grown adult. But I think watching her be brave, yes, a cartoon, and her have courage and not know exactly what was calling her, but knowing something was calling her and following that and feeling in my own life something was calling me and I needed to step out to follow that, I think really impacted me and is probably why Moana won on my bracket.
That makes sense.
But even the music, I was just like listening to this music on my way to work with no kids in my car and thinking like, oh my gosh, I can do it. How far can I go?
I love that so much. Yes, that totally makes sense. And as you say that, it makes me think how different movies have impacted me in different parts of my life. And one that has recently impacted me like crazy is a Goofy movie. Which is so funny, but like I watched that as a kid and I thought it was so funny and I thought, oh man, Goofy just won't let Max be and like da-da-da. And I watch it now and I'm like sobbing because I'm like, my kids are gonna get older and they're not gonna want me to go on vacation with me and they're just gonna say like they're gonna want to go to a concert with their friends and like so I mean it is definitely like, oh my goodness, these movies have like get a different reaction with me as I get older and I'm no longer the kid in the situation, but the adult. And I just am looking at them completely differently.
Let's talk about Walt Disney for a minute. How has Walt Disney's life and the example we've kind of read about and learned about from him impacted your life?
Gosh, I mean, so much. Like I'll see a quote or see something and it's like, oh, that really hit me today. And then it's like underneath Walt Disney. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like I love like how he just had no inhibitions about dreaming big and why not doing this thing that everyone is thinking that you can't do. And, I mean, I always tell my kids dream big. And I feel like that was something in me before I even realized like, oh, this is, we have this, similarity or this connection with Walt Disney. But that for me is at the core of what his voice was saying, not giving up and keep moving forward and, continue to just have these dreams and don't let anyone tell you that you need to grow up or that you can't do it, I feel like we've talked about this before. We probably have how, I read this book talking about how as children, the window of opportunity is wide open and we see as limitless potential, and it's like, look at all this, we can achieve and we can fly and I'm going to be an astronaut and then I'm going to be a firefighter and then I'm going to like be a doctor for a while. And, we have all these dreams and we can do anything, you know? And then as you get older, bit by bit, people start to knock you down and close that window. So by the time you finish high school or finish college, that window of opportunity that once was completely wide open has closed down to being, you know, maybe inches open. And what you think is possible, you're looking through this very, very small opening when really the window hasn't changed. You know, there still is all that possibility, but your perception of it has changed. And I think that Walt Disney, like, you know, I mean, and there are other people who have done this too, but his, you know, legacy, it's hard to find other legacies that are as wide as his. Just really preaches that like no other, you know, and that's really what I want for not just my kids, but myself, you know, like I want to continue to see my window of opportunity as being limitless and never tell myself that I can't do something because of what someone else has said or what I, you know, maybe think isn't possible.
So this year I held an event for 100 women and just had this idea to do this. And, you know, it hadn't been done in my area before. I hadn't done it before, obviously. And about a week or two before, I was just super worried about, you know, where we were on ticket sales and who was going to come and who was going to like it and were people going to get a good message from it. And my husband said, you know, let me tell you a story about a guy who was like, I want to open up this really cool thing here in this really not awesome part of California. And everyone said, no, don't do it. That's awful. That's a terrible idea. And anyway, he keeps going and it unravels that it's Walt Disney. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to channel my inner Walt Disney and I'm going to move forward. And that's exactly what I did. And it was a success and it was amazing. So anyway, we also lean on that wisdom, I think, a lot as well.
That is great. Yeah. I mean, there's so much we can learn from his story. And I think I love all of those stories, you know, and successful people who it's not like they were just born successful, you know, they had to learn these things. And a lot of times they fell down along the way, but they just kept going.
What do you think is a tip to being happy in the good, the bad, and the in-between?
It immediately popped in my head, though. It's just gratitude.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, completely changes everything for me. I mean, I can't even describe, you know, when I'm having a bad day or something, I'm, you know, struggling with something. It's just like, but man, like, I am so grateful for this and this and this. You know, I can just sit down and think about it. I mean, that just changes so much. Like, I mean, I think that in the industry that I'm in with different, you know, writers and influencers and people, like a lot of times you can see people doing things that you're not doing. And that can be hard. Like right now I have this is kind of bringing it back to Disney. Right now I have some friends who are finding out about like, oh, who's going to this Disney conference next year that's like invite only, you know, or whatever. And I did not get an invitation this year, but I was not upset about it. Like, I was just like, man, but I got to go last year and I was able to make enough this year where I can take my family on a cruise for Thanksgiving and we are getting our Disney fun, like on that and another way, you know, like I just immediately went to gratitude and that helped me through that. So, I mean, not that it's like, you know, this like devastating thing, but I mean, just anything that immediately could drag me down, I just kind of try to flip it around and think about. But, you know, I have this to be grateful for. And that, well, I think it's so much of my happiness.
Yeah, I think life is full of that. Not necessarily the devastating things that happen to us, although those happen in life, but the little things that are irritating and sad and disappointing throughout the day. And I think gratitude helps so much with that. So I'm glad you shared that example. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I so appreciate it. I think it was such a fun way to have this conversation about Disney with Disney Plus coming out and to talk about some really serious things too.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's so fun to chat with you.
I am so thankful Jennifer came on to the podcast to talk all things Disney with me. I love how Disney plays such a huge role in her family's traditions and opening up tough conversations. I've linked Jennifer's information in show notes, and I want to thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.